RP Plus, welcome back. James Hoffman with you once again, and we are working on our annual plan that we had started a little while ago. So if you hadn't seen some of the other videos where we have talked about how to construct an annual plan, and then the one that was immediately previous to this one on how to start putting it together, definitely go back and watch those because a lot of this isn't going to make any damn sense. So what we are doing is now that we have our macro cycle strategies laid out, which is what we did last time, what we're going to do right now is try and lay out some mesocycle strategies. So kind of like our month-to-month, week-to-week type strategies. So what we have already done is we made our annual plan, and you can see we have basically like a whole kind of general outline of what we're going to do for a year. But really what we have right now is a shell. We don't have any real explicit information. So what we're going to start doing now is start kind of filling in the gaps on some of this stuff. Now, usually what I recommend that you do is burp. Very nice. Into the microphone too, right? We run a classy, we are a classy organization here at RP, burping into our professional videos. Very nice. Okay, so anyways, what I normally recommend that you do is you actually work backwards, right? So you start at your competitive period. So if I was really doing this like diligently from home, like for clients and stuff, I would start here and kind of work my way either to the left or to the right. What I'm going to do for demonstration purposes, just so you can kind of see my thought process and what I'm doing, I'm actually just going to start over here because I think this is where most people are most comfortable with, which is kind of like the general preparatory stuff, the hypertrophy, strength, endurance type stuff. So we're going to start over here and we're just going to start outlining some mesocycle strategies as we go through this. So the first thing that I have here, as you can see, I've highlighted the hypertrophy 1 group here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start boxing this in a little bit. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to another sheet. So I'm going to change the name on this one just to say annual plan. So that way I always know this is kind of my main outline. What I'm going to do now is make another sheet, and I'm going to rename it. All I'm doing is right-clicking on sheet 2 and saying hypertrophy 1, hypertrophy 1, boom, and that's it. What I'm doing next is really easy. I'm just going to hyperlink this group of rows or columns, whatever you want to call it. What I'm going to do is go hyperlink. And then I'm going to change over here from existing file or web page. I'm going to say place in the document. And then I'm going to highlight that new one that I just made. So now, whenever I click here, ta-da! Did I just blow your mind? Isn't that cool? Excel's pretty neat. Now here's the thing. If you change this or you change the name of it at any point, that hyperlink will not work anymore. So once I have made that, I have to kind of leave it alone. But for the most part, I'm good to go. So what am I going to start doing right now? Well, this is my first hypertrophy cycle. We said this phase was a body composition phase within our general prep phase. So what I have here is a 4-week cycle of hypertrophy 1. I have a 4-week cycle of hypertrophy 2. And then I have kind of a transitional period here of basic strength that we also left within our body composition alteration phase here. What we did here was we made this kind of a transitional period so we could start doing our maximum strength power stuff over here without spanning too big of a gap in the reps, right? So what we're going to see in this first hypertrophy mesocycle is what you would expect to see in most standard hypertrophy training programs. And we're just going to keep it really, really basic for now. So I'm going to come back over here. First couple things I want to do, right? First, I like to make just a little table for myself that has how many weeks, right? So one thing that sometimes I think people forget is to label the number of weeks, which seems silly, but it's an easy one to miss because sometimes, as you might notice, like if you look at this one that I'm highlighting, this is a 5-weeker, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whereas these are 4-weekers. So sometimes that can get a little confusing if you're not, being diligent. And so what I would normally recommend that you do is also put in the date, but I know that's extra boring for you guys to just watch me enter numbers. So what I'm just going to do is say 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Just to remind myself, and in real world, you'd probably want to put the actual dates in there, but obviously I don't want to bore you guys to death. So now what we're going to do is maybe fill in some other things. What types of reps am I expecting to do? Or actually, let's do it more normal. We'll do sets, reps, intensity, right? So here I'm just making kind of a skeleton for myself of what I'm going to do. And I'm really anal about this stuff, and I like them to be center aligned, right? And, look nice. Okay. So what kind of stuff are we going to be doing in Hypertrophy 1? Well, most of you guys who have been following RP know that there's all sorts of cool guidelines we have out there. I'm going to keep it easy peasy. We're not going to do any individualization at this point. All I'm going to show is a basic progression. And then the nice thing is I can always go back and change this later. So I might go back and say, okay, I have my base template, which is what I'm creating now. And then I'm going to start tailoring that to my individual athlete later on. So instead of saying starting at 3 sets at, whatever intensity, I might start at 4 sets at a different intensity. That doesn't matter right now. All we're doing right now is just mapping out some basic stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to map out a 4-week progression. So we're going to say 3, 4, 5. Nothing crazy there. We're just going to say reps of 10. Nothing too crazy. I'm just going to keep that consistent. And so here we have kind of our accumulation phase. This is our overreaching phase. And then this is our deload, right? No surprise there. The intensity. We're just going to start basic. I'm going to say 85% of 3 by 10. What I'm going to do is basically just kind of copy and paste this, and then I'm going to change these just to show a progression here. Now, does it have to be this exact progression? No. And is this one that I have used plenty of times? Yes, absolutely. But more likely what you're going to do here is kind of just put some general stuff down, and that's what I'm doing right now. Just putting some general stuff down to remind myself, hey, this is what's going on. If you want to fine tune this up a little bit later, no big deal. But at least I know for the month, for whatever weeks, this is generally what I'm doing. Now I'm moving into my deload. I'm going to make this maybe 2 by 10 or 2 by 8. Let's just do it 2 by 10 just for the sake of ease. And then we're going to bring this down to, since we're keeping it 2 by 10, we're going to bring the intensity down a little bit more. And we'll say 70% of, 3 by 10. Okay. Now, again, does it have to be exactly this? Absolutely not. Have fun with it. Do it however you want to do. This is just a simple reminder to myself that says, you know what? Week 1, 424, I'm supposed to be doing 3 by 10 at about 85% of 3 by 10. And week 2, May 1st, I should be at 4 by 10 at about 90%, right? And again, you can absolutely change this. Now, I have this. You can make it look pretty if you want to make it boxed or whatever. Sometimes people like to make these kind of like color-coded, where you might make this one like kind of orange to say like this is the overreaching week, and then you might make this one like kind of like a light green, like deload. Whatever you want to do is cool. Like, this is your world. This is your Bob Ross. Paint a little happy tree over here. Have a little happy deload, a little happy overreaching phase. That's nice, right? None of those government agents can take that away from you. I love that guy. You guys ever watch him on Netflix? He's great. Anyways, one other thing that I like to do here, and it could be, you can put it anywhere you want, right? It doesn't, whatever makes sense to you. I'm just doing this as demonstration. One thing I do like to add is just a kind of friendly reminder to myself. Now, you can make this really explicit, or you can make it more generalized and a little bit more vague about what they're doing in terms of their sport practice as well. So what I like to work on a stoplight system where I'll have something like weight training, resistance training, put over here. What I'll say maybe is cardiovascular, or so we can say like cardio. And what I also like to incorporate is things like technical practice. So are they doing a lot of sports techniques? We'll say tactical practice. Are they working on drills and scrimmaging, stuff like that? And then you can also add any number of things, but these are things that are kind of important, right? And so what I'll usually do here is, since we're in hypertrophy, I'll make a note to myself as a friendly reminder that what are we actually doing in our when we're thinking about training from a big perspective, right? Well, here we're primarily doing a lot of weight training. So what I'm just going to do, you know what? I'm just going to make this green, just because I know weight training is a go. We're going to spend most of our time doing weight training. Cardio can be hit or miss for some people, right? So let's just assume that we're doing this body composition alteration phase, and let's assume that our athlete was massing. So we're actually probably minimizing the amount of cardio that this person is doing. Now, if this was a cut phase, or if your needs analysis said, hey, homeboy really needs to work on cardio, you might change that depending on what you thought was important. But for us, I'm going to say, you know what? Time to get jacked, homie. We're not going to be doing a lot of cardio. So cardio is a red light for me. technical practice. Where are we in our annual plan? Well, man, we are early on. We're going to be doing probably a lot of just technique work for whatever sport or activity it is that we're doing. So if we're doing like weightlifting or powerlifting, bodybuilding, this tends to be very straightforward. But if we're doing other sports, like hockey, rugby, lacrosse, basketball, this is where we're going to spend a lot of time working on our basic sport techniques. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this one green again and say, hell yeah, we're doing a lot of weight training, doing a lot of technical practice. And you know what? We're really not doing very much tactics. So I'm not going to make this one a red light. So here what we can see is a lot of weight training, a lot of sport practice, not much cardio going on, not much scrimmaging, not much drilling, not much stuff like that, right? So this is just a friendly reminder. I kind of like the hot, cold, like medium kind of system. It's really just meant for you to remind yourself, right? What's going on? Now, can you put numbers to this and say, yeah, we're doing sport practice 2 times a week? Absolutely, then you should. But again, this is kind of our mesocycle strategy. We maybe haven't gotten that far yet. This is just a reminder because you're going to keep fine-tuning this as you go, right? So what do I actually have? Well, right now, I actually mapped out basically what I'm doing. The only thing I don't actually have explicitly written are the exercises that I'm doing, and then if any sport-related stuff that I'm doing. So, actually for Hypertrophy 1, I got quite a bit of the stuff done already. And what I'm just going to do, because I like to do this, you don't have to, I like to make another hyperlink. I'm just going to say back to plan. Nothing too crazy. And then what you're going to do is right-click, hyperlink, place in the document, and then I'm going to highlight the first page that I made with the annual plan. So now when I'm working on this, I can actually go back and forth. Oh, look at that. It's so cool. Oh my goodness. Okay, great. So I've done basically my mesocycle strategies here for Hypertrophy 1, right? This is basically a pretty high volume phase. Nothing too crazy here. I know this might be more like 8 to 12 or something like that. I know I might play around with the sets. I might play around with the intensities a little bit later on. That's all fine and good, but I have a pretty good idea of what's going on here. Now, moving on to Hypertrophy 2. I'm going to do the same thing. Now, one of the things we got to remember is we have to see if there's any competition. So no competitions inside here, right? We see there's one over here coming up, but there's none inside over here for now, so we can have a lot of fun. We can just overreach this guy. Now, if we're doing or girl, who knows who it is, right? Or maybe they're somewhere in between. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Hypertrophy 2. I'm going to do the exact same thing. What I'm going to do is go over here to sheet 3. I'm going to rename it Hypertrophy 2. And I'm going to hyperlink it on my main page. So Hypertrophy 2 is here, right click, hyperlink. I'm gonna click Hypertrophy 2, and just remember, if I change the name, that will not work anymore, right? So what am I gonna do now? Well, it turned out I can actually use a lot of the same stuff over here I did for this first one, right? So now, check this out, Shazam. I'm the man. It's like I've done this before. Cool, I've copy and pasted, saved myself a little bit of work. I got those same links going. I got this. Might have to make it look pretty again, but that's fine. No big deal, right? And again, this can be whatever you want. I just did it this way because it's simple and easy to understand. Now, Hypertrophy 2. What should we do for Hypertrophy 2? Well, this might be a good time to incorporate a metabolite phase, depending on how much hypertrophy we really want to push this athlete for. Now, what I would say is, excuse me, for most strength power sports, this is something that I think is worth mentioning because this has been something that I know we've certainly promoted at RP, but I think people might get the wrong idea. The metabolite style training might not be the best choice for strength power athletes in general. Maybe as a once in a while kind of thing might be cool, but for the most part, that might actually start deviating too far outside of force and velocity characteristics for our strength and power athletes. So if you're dealing with somebody who it really needs to be as strong, as explosive as humanly possible, like an Alex Harrison kind of person, like a bobsled pusher or track and field type athlete, this might not be a good idea because it tends to emphasize a little bit more of the slow twitch type characteristics where we're really doing super, super high volumes. The forces are very, very low. The rest times are low. We're having constant incomplete recovery, and we're really not able to move fast, do high force movements, things like that. And so what we end up potentially doing is seeing more of a shift to those type 1 characteristics. Now, That's just food for thought. That's not to say it's right or wrong. It's food for thought. So depending on who you're working with, this might not be the best idea. However, I would also argue on the other end of the spectrum, it is useful for hypertrophy and for variation purposes, maybe once or twice a year might actually be beneficial. But what I would say is if you're working with somebody and you're making this plan for somebody who does like, hockey or baseball or anything like that, that might not be the best choice. You might want to stick to more traditional kind of set and rep hypertrophy style schemes where we're just doing lots of, higher reps, lots of sets, stuff like that. But let's just have fun and add a little variety, a little spice to our life here. So we're going to make hypertrophy 2 a metabolite phase because we said our guy was really, really trying his best or her best to be as muscular as possible. So, all right, we're going to say, all right, metabolite phase. Now, this is where things get a little bit crazy, right? So what we might actually kind of go for here is something a little bit different. We might actually kind of increase our baseline sets a little bit just because the intensity is so much lower. What we're going to be shooting for kind of is more of a range of reps. So why don't we say something like 12 to 20? Because for those of you who have not done this before, and those of you who have kind of already know this intuitively, I messed up my color. You see that? Oh, fudge. Let's see if I can get it back. I don't even know what I used. There we go. One of the things that is giving strict set by reps for this type of training is a wash, right? So basically what you can kind of do is program reps from failure, which I think is a smart way to do it, with a goal being somewhere around something that you could do for about 15 reps, somewhere in there. So all I'm going to do right here, I'm just going to denote 3 from fail, and I'm going to say, parentheses, about 15 reps is what I'm shooting for. So again, if this is going to be a bit more variable, you might get like 20, 17, 16, 14 kind of thing, and that's perfectly fine. So it's just what I'm saying is it's hard to say like 4 times 20 at X percentage of 20 rep max. You know what I mean? It's just difficult to do that. So what I'm going to say is pick a weight that you think they can do reasonably for about 15 or so reps. And now we're going to say, you know what? You're going to go 3 from fail in this first week. We're going to take that idea. I'm going to do this without messing up my colors this time. Watch this. Oh, dang it. Try again. There we go. Watch this. Yes. So now what we're going to do is make an intensity progression, as we always do. So then this week we're going about 2 from fail, right? And we're going about 1 from fail. And so for the deload, we could program it a little bit more easy. We can say 2 times 10, and we'll say about 70% of week 1, whatever weight that you used. Something like that. Nothing too crazy. Okay, so that's here, right? And again, don't take this overly literally. Again, this can be difficult to program on paper, but basically what we know here for this metabolite style phase, and you can make a note here, right? And you can also say like, put an asterisk or something and say, hey, this is meant to be everything less than 1 minute rest, like 1 minute rest or something like that, just to remind yourself like, hey, you know what, this is a metabolite phase. We got to make sure that we are clear about that. Nothing too crazy. So I made it bold, maybe put a big box around it and say, hey, don't forget, this is what's going on here, right? So that's kind of the quick, dirty version of that. We're operating, again, on a 4-week schedule here. 4 weeks, all good. What you would do is enter in the appropriate dates, right? Instead of just 1, 2, 3, 4, you'd say the actual dates. Let's go over here to this one. So what are we going to be doing over here? Well, kind of virtually the same thing in this case. We're not going to see a whole lot of progression from weight training and practice to tactical and cardio. We're basically going to be doing primarily just weight training stuff, basically as much as they can tolerate. So again, nothing too fancy here. I've actually just mapped out my mesocycle strategies for these two. Now I'm going to keep going down the line, right? And I'm going to move through these a little bit faster because you guys have watched me do this already twice. So now I'm going to say basic strength. I believe that's what I titled it over here. I hope so. Yep. Great. So now I'm going to rename it, or I'm going to hyperlink it. Here you can see same process that I did before. Now, again, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm good there, but we got a problem. All right. So let's see what we can do here. I'm going to just copy and paste this one again because I think this one will be a little easier to work with. Boom. Make it look pretty. And you can also just double click a lot of the times. Great. So now we're going to see a little progression. So we did 10s over here. Here we have the really, really high crazy rep phase. What I want you to consider is a phase potentiated model here, right? So for bodybuilding physique training, this is great. For power maximal strength kind of stuff, it unfortunately is not a great progression. So we can't go from doing reps of 20 and then transitioning over here to doing maximal strength and power speed over here for these competitions later on. That just won't do. So what we kind of need to have is this transitional period in between the hypertrophy work, which should have developed a huge buttload of work capacity for our athlete, which is great. Now we have to teach them to use that new muscle mass that they have been growing and now make it more forceful. And that's what we're going to do here in this basic strength phase. So we're going to lower the reps down just a little bit, nothing super crazy, but this will kind of serve as a transitional period and a period where they still can continue to grow muscle mass, maybe not quite as much as if we did it a more traditional bodybuilding style where these would be kind of shifted over. This is more of an athletic progression style. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a basic strength phase that's going to link these two guys together. Now, what should the set and reps be over here? Well, generally, what I would do is probably something like 6 to 8. So what I find though is when you really span the gap when they're doing like sets of 15 or 20 and then you drop them down to like 5s or 6s, it's too brutal of a shift. So we're going to actually just keep the reps a little bit on the higher end. We're going to do 8s. 8s is kind of a happy place where we're in that strength, basic strength range, but we haven't made this like super crazy jump from different rep ranges. So what we're going to see here is a little bit different. So I'm actually going to wipe these out because we're going to have to do something a little bit different on this one. Now, what was important? What did we have to note here? There's a competition, 626 on week 2. So on week 2, I'm going to note here, comp, right? And again, however you want to note it is cool. It doesn't matter. I'm just doing this to just remind you, like, you need to account for this, right? So there's a competition here. So now we have kind of a conundrum. Normally during the general preparatory phase, we like to overreach our athlete, right? And we still basically would like to do that, but we're in a bit of a pickle where this comp is like in week 2, which is a really unfortunate place to put it. So what we're probably going to actually have to do here is something slightly different, but we might be able to carry on with the rest of the week. So week 1 might be okay as is. Week 2, something's going to have to change. Weeks 3 and 4 are probably okay as is. Now, what I would recommend in this case is you have 2 big options. The first option is a little food for thought. Some competitions don't really matter. Some are just fun and they're just meant for just recreation and they don't have any major standings on what you're doing. So the first option that you can do is to actually just train right through this comp and make no changes. Is it the best idea? Maybe, maybe not. But what this is more of a long-term strategy where you say, you know what, I'm not really as concerned about performing well on this particular competition. Really, I'm more concerned about making long-term gains. So I'm actually just going to keep doing my normal training thing and really not make any adjustments for this competition. So that's an option, and it's a valid option. There is an increased risk of poor performance, obviously, because you're going to be carrying around the normal fatigue of hard training. So they're going to be training at their, hopefully close to their MRV, and competing under those circumstances is generally not good. And I would also say there's probably a higher potential risk of injury, right? So we want to make sure that we're not beating them up too bad. So what we're probably going to do here is kind of just a modified week where we might actually just say, you know what, week 2, what we're going to do is something slightly different. And however you want to denote this, you know, is up to you. But I'm just going to make a little note to myself that says, hey, week 2, right? Maybe a little asterisk because we knew there was a match going on there. We might say first half normal, second half we'll do like a mini deload. So basically we'll take the same kind of thing that we would normally do here in week 4 and we'll apply that to the second half, right? So what that means is, let's say they were training 4 days per week. That means Monday, Tuesday training would be 100% normal. And then maybe Thursday, Friday training was deload style where the reps were significantly reduced. The intensity was reduced as well. And you might even consider, if they were working on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule, and let's say their competition was Saturday, you might even consolidate the last 2 training days, like their Thursday, Friday, into just Thursday, maybe pick and choose the exercises that were most important and take some of the superfluous ones out. And that way they have Friday off and then they have their competition on Saturday. Either way is fine. Generally, I usually don't program any lifting days the day before competition for my athlete. Even though light days, I don't do that. Now, we might come in and do like a shakeout session, and track and field's really good about this, where they just come in and they kind of do like a warm-up type thing. No big deal. That's fine, but no like structured, even recovery day lifting. That should be at least one day out, right? So we're going to say probably consolidate into one day and just do like a little mini half deload there. And then we can actually just leave these basically the same. I just need to change the intensities here, right? So instead of 10s, we got 8s. Nothing too fancy there. Now you might be thinking like, man, 8's not all that different than the 10s that we did before, right? And that's true. It's not all that much different. But again, we're trying to do a little bit of a phasic progression here. Sometimes those little drops go a long way. I think people too often make the big jumps where they go from like 15s to 6s, and that's where you start to run into some major problems. So little jumps, little drops along the way are good. Now, what is noteworthy here is take a look. What have they not really been doing? Well, they've basically just been working on technique. They haven't really started working on any real sport practice stuff. So what we might say over here is they might see a little bit of a shift. So what I'm going to say here is weight training is still green. We're going to maybe change cardio from red maybe to yellow, where we're saying, you know, we got competitions coming up in the near future. If there is any cardio to be done, let's start working on it. And then what we're going to see here is a little bit of a shift, where we're going to start incorporating some team tactics as well. But we're still primarily focused on technique, right? So now we're just saying a little bit of team tactics is occurring at this time. So again, mesocycle strategy, nothing too crazy. So now I can go back to the plan, see where I'm at. Okay, great. So now we're just going to keep going down the line, and I'm just going to go through for a little bit here because I think most of you are getting the idea at this point, but it's pretty simple, right? So I'm going to open a new tab. I'm going to change the name. I'm going to say max strength power 1, I believe. Crud. Rename. And I think I'm going to say max strength and power. Yep, let's go with that. Rename. Max strength power. However you want to, abbreviate it. Boom. Hyperlink it. Boom. Cool. Now, if that works, we can double check. Now, this one is different, right? We have a 5-week system here instead of a 4-week. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that same kind of schedule thing that we made over here. However, we have to be aware that now this is not as applicable, and we actually have to make this 5 weeks. And then we might kind of see a little changing of the guard over here. So now, are there any competitions that we need to be aware? Doesn't look like it, but we do have a competition coming up later over here. Not a huge deal. So what we're going to say is we can still overreach our athlete, even doing maximum strength and power stuff. No big deal. So we're going to go back and work on this one. What we're going to see here is some pretty significant changes in sets and reps. So here, what we're going to do is maybe do some 3x3s, 4x3s, 5x3s, something like that. And we might not be able to progress quite as aggressively week to week when we do the 5-week progression. So what I'm going to do is start with 3, have one where we see a pretty large jump in intensity. So again, when we have the 5-weekers, sometimes it's not easy to make really, really crazy jumps in volume and intensity because you run out of space later on where you just got nothing left in the tank and you still got a couple weeks to go. So what we're going to do here is we're going to see a little bit of a shift. We're going to actually go 80%. And what I'm going to do here is take a big jump by about 10% week 1. And then I'm going to take smaller jumps these last couple weeks. Now, do you have to do it exactly like this? No, you can do whatever you want. But this is just an example where, you know what? We didn't see a big volume jump here because I can't just necessarily go linear where I go 3, 4, 5, 6, especially as the intensity goes up. That's just not going to be feasible. They're going to start to break down and wear and tear. So I'm going to say, okay, we have a more moderate volume progression, but week 1 we have a very large intensity progression, but then the intensity doesn't get quite as crazy later on. But we still get up to about a 95% effort of whatever we, kind of whatever rep range that we worked on. So over here, maybe we'll do 2x2. We'll say maybe somewhere around, 70% of where we were before week 1. Okay. So boom, shakalaka, we got that one. Now we're going to actually start to see a pretty significant changing over here where we say, okay, we had weight training, we had sport-specific cardio, we had sport-specific practice. So now what we're going to do is we're going to see a change in the amount of weight training. So weight training is going to go yellow because we're actually going to be reducing the training volume of weight training pretty substantially. If we are doing any sport-specific cardio, that is going to be a go. And again, that will be dependent on your needs analysis. Technical practice is going to start being reduced and made room for more tactical practice. So here we're going to actually see yellow. Actually, let's just make this one green just to kind of demonstrate what's going on. Right? So boom, that looks cool. Good to go. Right? Now again, we're working kind of with a shell, a mesocycle strategy. This is just kind of outlining my sets, reps, and intensities and basically what I'm going to be doing later on. I'm going to go back, see what's next. Power and speed. Okay, so make a new tab. Rename, power and speed. Nothing too crazy here, right? Go back, hyperlink it. Oops. Boom, right? So now, again, this one's a 5-weeker, and there's no comps. So I can take the nuts and bolts that I made over here in this one and apply it over here. And again, you'd want to have your own dates and stuff in here. I am going to change this a little bit. So now we're going to start with a little higher intensity. We're going to go to 2s. And then we can follow a very, very similar progression, right? So just by changing the reps, I know that what I can do for 2s versus what I can do for 3s is an automatic bump. I can actually, I can actually kind of just leave this mostly the same. And the reason I'm showing you this is not to be lazy, but because what you'll find is when you're making these, you end up copying and pasting this stuff kind of all the time. And then you'll go back at some point and you'll fine tune these things a little bit. And that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly okay. But really all I'm doing right now is just getting kind of a general idea of what I'm doing. So you notice I just copy and pasted that and just changed it from 3 to 2 because I transitioned my phase a little bit. That's perfectly fine, right? Nothing too crazy there. So copy and pasted it. Changed the intensity, changed the reps, but really it's mostly the same here, right? So no big deal. I'm going to follow a very similar progression. And of course, you will have to individualize this for your own athlete's MRV and all that stuff, but kind of a no-brainer. So now we're going to see a shift here. The weight training volume has been reduced pretty substantially. Technical practice is basically going to cease. And then what we're primarily going to be seeing is a lot of tactical practice and then any sport-specific cardio stuff that they need to do. And this can also basically come from their sport practice. So what I'm actually going to do is just make that yellow and just say, hey, this is kind of, actually, let's make that red because what they're doing here is primarily just doing enough weight training to enhance power and speed characteristics and maintenance of other previous characteristics, which is not much, right? They're getting most of their cardio now from doing their tactical practice and doing small-sided games. So here what we're seeing is these have been reduced very substantially, and now we're really just doing a lot of the tactical practice, which is going to be very fatiguing in itself. So boom, nothing too crazy there. I've outlined my mesocycle strategies. Now I'm starting to fill these in. It's starting to look pretty good, right? So you might actually notice that some of these are kind of reoccurring. So what you might do now is some of these we haven't done. So we haven't done this strength endurance one, but we did do this max strength and power. Does this one have to be distinctly different than the other one? Probably not. What you need to check though is the number of weeks. So in this case, the max strength one power one we did over here was 5 weeks. Is that the same? It looks like it. Well, hot diggity damn, it's the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no comps. So what I can actually do is just hyperlink it to the same place, right? Max strength and power. That can basically be the same one. And then when you do this, you can make a separate one of these, right? Where you have, even if you need to, a different week, right? So we can say this is week of, or weeks of whatever, and this might be different for various reasons, but it's going to be mostly the same, especially when we start picking exercises and stuff like that. So kind of a nice cheater way to do it. And I know that might seem lazy, but this is really the reality, especially if you guys are working in strength conditioning. you will not have time to make 100 individualized plans for all these different athletes, especially if you're working with multiple teams. So the reason I bring this up is because a lot of these are more similar than they are different, right? So what I'm going to do is basically copy and paste as many of these as I can, right? So let's see, how about this power and speed one over here? This was a 5-weeker. This was also a 5-weeker, right? So that worked out really good. So what I'm going to actually do is hyperlink this one, but I have competitions in here, right? So I'm going to hyperlink this one to the power and speed one that we made before here, but I'm going to make a note and say, you know what? Again, week of, this is a different time of the year, but we're doing the same general workouts. And then we can actually look at this and say, okay, well, what weeks did we have comps? We had 1, 2, 3, and 5. Right? So in this one, we'll say comp, right? And we know that we might actually have to make some week-to-week kind of adjustments on this one. But that's not a huge deal. We can go and deal with that later. Okay, is there any other ones that we can kind of cheat a little bit here? It looks like it. Sorry, burping all over the place. Okay, basic strength. I think that was a 4-weeker. Can we actually? Yes, we can. Boom. Let's do it. Now, do they have to be the same? No, you can certainly make them a different one, right? So if you wanted to do a different basic strength, just make it called basic strength 2, and then you do the same process where you say, you know what, in this one, I don't want to do 8s, maybe I wanted to do 5s or 6s or whatever, and that's totally cool. Nothing to worry about there. So now when I click on it, right, boom, here's our basic outline. I'll make another one below, and we'll say weeks of, whatever those weeks are. And then let's go and make sure that the competition schedule is different, right? So in this one, we had basic strength, no comps at all. So we can actually just delete this altogether. Nothing fancy there. And they can just overreach as normal. So again, once you kind of get going on some of this stuff, it's not super challenging. And then the nice thing is, if you're smart, well, I don't want to say if you're smart, but if you're kind of like intuitive about it, you can end up copying and pasting a lot of this stuff over and over and over again. And then the only thing you have to adjust are the number of weeks in the mesocycle potentially, or if they have competitions. And so this makes it really, really easy. So I think I'm going to maybe take a break on this one for now, because I think you guys get the gist of it. So the next one that we're going to do, we'll start actually breaking down some of these into the actual exercise selection, which is, I think, what most people are really interested in learning about, although I find it to be probably the most simple and straightforward part. So for now, all we've done is we've done our macro cycle strategy, where we laid out the general preps, the specific preps, the competition periods, the transition periods, tapering periods, stuff like that. Today, what we did is within this, we actually started laying out some kind of basic mesocycle strategies, where we looked at sets, reps, progressions that we're going to be doing throughout the year. We said, hey, we were also considering the other things that are going on for our athlete, maybe if they're doing different sport practice stuff, maybe if they have competitions, and really we're just getting kind of a baseline idea of the sets, reps, volumes, intensity, progression that we want to use. Now, again, the ones that you guys watched me do today were really basic, right? They're mostly 3x10, 85%, 90%, 95%. That's just a general kind of starting point. Now, can you make it more complicated than that? Can you use different numbers? 100% absolutely. Do you have to follow these exact progressions that I've laid out? No, not at all, right? These are just meant to be an example. In the real world, these things are much more complicated, and there's all sorts of crazy shenanigans that you have to deal with, right? What didn't we even factor in today? Okay, well, we didn't factor in travel at all. We didn't factor in NCAA compliance. We didn't factor in holidays, any of that kind of stuff. But the point being, we have a pretty good idea of what our athletes are going to be doing at any given point in time. Now, we didn't do all these. Like, there's a couple that we, like this active rest, this power speed 2, some of these tapering periods. We haven't done all of them. But if somebody was like, hey, what is your athlete supposed to be doing on June 5th? You can go, oh, you know what? Boom, I've got this open. They're supposed to be doing, in the middle of their hypertrophy metabolite training phase, I've got a pretty good idea. And this works out really good when you're working either with a staff or when you're collaborating with other people, and you always have this plan that it's easy to understand. And what I like about the hyperlinks too is if you have like somebody and you say, hey, can you cover my golf team, or okay, can you cover my athlete today? They say, sure, what's the plan? You say, oh, just open it up for them and say, hey, find the week. You know, okay, today is August 7th. Oh, okay, there it is, max strength and power. Here's kind of what they're working on. Okay, good. And then later we'll fill in the exercises, and it's like no brainer, right? Really, really easy. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I apologize. I know this isn't the most thrilling thing to watch somebody work in Excel, but I hope you guys are getting a really good idea of kind of how this works and how some strategies to kind of give yourself less headache as you go, because it becomes really, really cumbersome, unnecessarily difficult when I think people try to make every single mesocycle as unique as humanly possible. It does not need to be that way. It's perfectly okay to recycle some of these mesocycles that you've already made throughout the year over and over and over again, especially when you're working with big teams like football and baseball where they got 100 guys. So that is perfectly okay. And then, of course, you can always individualize later on. So when you're starting, you start with big concepts, right? Where you're saying, okay, I have a basic volume and intensity progression. I have basic idea of what they're doing week to week. And then as you kind of go, you start making you start working to smaller things like, okay, what exercises, what plyometrics, what sport practice are we doing? And then once you are in the game and you're actually running this program that you met, you can start individualizing the program based on your athlete needs and your testing and monitoring. You say, you know what, their MRV, they need to be doing, 20 sets of chest per week. I need to adjust my set and reps, but they can't do quite that as many squats because they're got sport practice. That's all going to occur later. If you try and do that super, super early on, you're just going to drive yourself mad. So start basic, like we did today. We say, okay, hypertrophy 1, I'm doing sets of 10. I have a progression. I'm moving on to hypertrophy 2. I have a slightly different progression. I'm moving on to basic strength. I have a slightly different progression there. I'm moving into maximal strength, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Boom. I have a pretty good idea of how this is working. All right, RP Plus, I hope this was helpful. I will be releasing another video where we start doing the kind of microcycle day-to-day strategies to finish this one out. And I hope you guys are enjoying RP Plus and kicking butt working on your programs or programs for your clients.